The day was supposed to be the happiest moment of my life. The hall was draped with flowers, the golden lights reflected off the crystal chandeliers, and my heart was racing with excitement as I prepared to marry Daniel. I had dreamed of this day since I was a little girl, and after years of saving every dollar, I thought nothing could go wrong. My parents had passed away when I was young, so every penny I had for my wedding was the result of my hard work, sacrifices, and sleepless nights. But in the middle of all the laughter, behind the perfect photographs, a storm was brewing that would change everything. "Relax, Sophia," my best friend Emma whispered as she adjusted my veil. "You look stunning. Nothing can ruin this day." I smiled weakly, trying to hide my nerves. Yet, somewhere deep inside, I felt uneasy. Daniel's parents, especially his mother, Margaret, had never liked me. They thought I wasn't good enough for their son. But Daniel had always defended me, telling me that love mattered more than money or status. The ceremony went beautifully. Daniel and I exchanged vows. The guests applauded, and I thought maybe, just maybe, things were finally falling into place. But then came the reception, and with it, the announcement that shattered everything. When it was time to settle the venue payment, I confidently handed the manager the receipt folder. Inside were the funds I had worked so hard to save, money that was supposed to cover the wedding hall, the caterers, and every little detail. But the manager's face turned pale as he flipped through the folder. "Miss Sophia," he said cautiously, I think there's been some mistake. The envelope is empty." My chest tightened. "What do you mean empty? That can't be possible. I personally checked everything." The manager shook his head and showed me the folder. Not a single dollar remained. My blood ran cold. Before I could react, Margaret, my new mother-in-law, stood up dramatically. "Oh, how embarrassing," she exclaimed, loud enough for the entire table to hear. "A bride who can't even pay for her own wedding. Daniel, I told you she wasn't prepared for this life." The room erupted into whispers. My cheeks burned as I tried to process what had happened. Emma clutched my arm. "Sophia, did you lock the money safely? You told me it was all in that folder." "I did," I cried, panic rising in my throat. "I swear it was there." That's when Daniel's father, Richard, smirked. "Well, someone must have misplaced it. But honestly, Sophia, maybe you were careless. Money isn't for girls like you to handle." Tears blurred my vision. I knew this wasn't a mistake. Someone had stolen my savings. But who? Later that evening, as the guests continued to whisper, Daniel pulled me aside. "Sophia, what's going on? My parents are furious. They think you embarrassed us." "I didn't lose the money," I sobbed. "Daniel, you have to believe me. It was all there this morning." He sighed, rubbing his temples. "I want to believe you, but it looks bad. Maybe you should have been more careful." The words stabbed my heart. Daniel, the man who promised to stand by me, was doubting me on our wedding night. And then, as if fate wanted to torture me further, I overheard Margaret whispering to one of her relatives. She actually thought her little savings would cover a wedding like this. Pathetic. It was too easy to take. Now she learned her place. The realization hit me like lightning. It was them. My in-laws had stolen the money. They had humiliated me on purpose. The next day, while everyone acted as if nothing had happened, I confronted Margaret directly. "Why did you do it?" I demanded, my voice trembling with rage. She gave me a cold smile. "Do what, darling? If you lost your own money, that's hardly my concern." "Don't play games with me," I snapped. "I heard you last night." Her eyes glinted with malice. "Listen carefully, Sophia. You are in our family now. Whatever you had before means nothing. You are nothing. The sooner you accept that, the easier your life will be." My fists clenched. "You may think you've won, but I'll never forget this. One day, you'll regret what you did." She laughed mockingly. "Regret? Oh dear, you'll be too busy surviving to make anyone regret anything." That night, I lay awake beside Daniel, who was already drifting to sleep. My heart was heavy, but inside me, a spark was born, a fire I had never felt before. They thought I was weak, that I would bow my head and accept their cruelty, but I made myself a silent promise. I will rise. I will build something greater than they could ever imagine. And when the time comes, they will regret underestimating me. The betrayal at my wedding was the beginning of my transformation. What they meant for humiliation became the seed of my revenge. The honeymoon that followed should have been filled with laughter and love, but for me, it was nothing but silent nights and sleepless thoughts. Daniel tried to brush off the wedding disaster, as if it were just a minor hiccup, but I couldn't. The humiliation still clung to me like a shadow. Every time I looked at his parents' smug faces in the photographs, my chest tightened with rage. One evening, as we sat at dinner, I finally said what had been eating me alive. Daniel, I began carefully. We need to talk about what happened at the wedding. He sighed, putting down his fork. Sophia, not this again. My parents already feel insulted enough. Insulted, I stammered, my voice rising. They stole my money, Daniel. The money I saved for years. Don't you understand? They didn't just embarrass me, they destroyed my trust. His face hardened. You don't have proof. And I don't want to fight with my parents over baseless accusations. Maybe you misplaced it. Mistakes happen. My heart broke all over again. The man I had married, the one who promised to protect me, was defending his parents instead of me. That night, I cried silently into my pillow. I realized something painful but clear. I was on my own. Days turned into weeks. And life in my in-laws' house became unbearable. Margaret treated me like a servant, constantly reminding me of my failure. Dinner isn't ready yet, Sophia, she'd sneer. Oh right, maybe you lost the groceries just like you lost that money. Richard would laugh cruelly. Daniel should have married someone with brains. Or at least with money. Every word cut me deeper. But instead of breaking me, it hardened me. I began to build walls inside my heart, brick by brick. I stopped crying in front of them. I stopped defending myself. I decided I would save my energy, not for arguing, but for building my way out. One afternoon, I slipped away to meet Emma at a cafe downtown. She was the only person I trusted completely. You've lost weight, she said gently, her eyes scanning my tired face. They're draining you. I stirred my coffee, staring into the dark liquid. They've taken everything, Emma. My savings, my dignity, even Daniel's trust. But they haven't taken my will. I refuse to live like this forever. Emma leaned forward, her eyes full of determination. So what's your plan? I hesitated. The idea had been forming in my mind for weeks, but speaking it aloud made it real. I want to start my own business. Something small at first. I can't depend on anyone anymore. If I'm ever going to take back what they stole, I have to do it myself. Emma smiled. That's the Sophia I know. Fierce, brave, and unstoppable. Her words reignited the fire inside me. I felt alive for the first time since the wedding. But the road ahead was anything but easy. I had no money left, no family to support me, and a husband who thought my ambitions were foolish. When I told Daniel about my idea one evening, he laughed bitterly. A business? Sophia, you can barely handle this house without upsetting my mother. Do you really think you can run a business? I looked him straight in the eyes. Yes, and I will. He shook his head. Fine, do whatever you want. Just don't expect me to bail you out when you fail. His words hurt, but they also freed me. If he wasn't going to stand by me, then I would learn to stand alone. I found a job at a small bakery in town. It wasn't glamorous, but it was steady, and it paid enough for me to start saving again. Every morning, I would wake up before dawn, knead dough, serve customers, and clean counters until my back ached. Then I'd return home only to face Margaret's insults. Working in a bakery, how fitting, she scoffed one night. At least you'll smell like bread when you fail at everything else. But I didn't let her words touch me anymore. Each paycheck I received was a silent victory. Each dollar I saved was a step closer to my dream. After 6 months, I had saved enough to take a small risk. I rented a tiny stall at the weekend market and began selling handmade cakes and pastries. At first, business was slow, but Emma helped me spread the word. And soon customers started returning, not just for the taste, but for the passion I poured into every bite. One customer smiled at me after buying a box of cupcakes. You know, these are better than anything I've had at the big bakery downtown. You should open your own shop someday. His words planted a seed in my heart, a bigger dream. Of course, my in-laws ridiculed me when they found out. So you're selling bread at the market? Richard sneered. How ambitious. Maybe next week you'll sell vegetables too. Margaret laughed cruelly. Let her play shopkeeper. It's not like she ever achieved anything real. But I kept my head high. They didn't know it, but every insult only fueled my determination. Months passed, and the stall grew into something bigger. Orders came in regularly, and soon I had enough to rent a small shop space. I named it Sophia's Delights, and for the first time in my life, I felt proud of something that was mine and mine alone. Standing behind the counter on opening day, surrounded by flowers Emma had sent, I whispered to myself, this is just the beginning. What my in-laws had stolen from me was far greater than money. They had stolen my trust, my dignity, my peace of mind. But in trying to destroy me, they had given me the strongest gift of all, the determination to rise. I didn't know it yet, but this was the first step toward building an empire. And one day, that empire would crush the very people who had laughed at me. The small bakery shop I had opened felt like a fragile seed planted in the middle of a storm. It was modest just to display cases, a counter, and the smell of freshly baked bread wafting into the street, but to me, it was freedom. For the first time since my wedding, I felt like I had control over something. On the first morning, I nervously arranged the pastries in neat rows. My heart pounded with every customer who walked past. Would they come inside? Would they even care? Then Emma burst through the door with her usual energy. "Look at this place," she exclaimed, twirling in the middle of the shop. "Sophia, you've done it. It's beautiful." I smiled nervously. "It's small, Emma. Just a start." She grabbed my shoulders. "Don't say just. This is yours. And soon, everyone will know your name." The early days were brutal. I worked from dawn until midnight, baking, serving, and cleaning all by myself. Some nights, I collapsed into bed, with flowers still stuck in my hair. Daniel barely noticed. "Still wasting your time with that shop," he muttered one evening as he scrolled through his phone. I didn't respond. I had stopped expecting encouragement from him. I knew better than to waste energy arguing with someone who couldn't see my vision. Margaret, of course, found every opportunity to mock me. "So you've gone from bride to baker," she sneered one family dinner. "Congratulations, Sophia. Next, maybe you can mop floors for a living." I smiled politely and took another bite of my food. Inside, though, I whispered to myself, "One day, you'll eat your words. Every single one of them." Slowly, things began to change. Word spread about my bakery. Customers praised the freshness of the bread, the softness of the cakes, and the warmth they felt when I greeted them. Soon, regulars began coming back week after week. One afternoon, an older woman came in with her granddaughter. After tasting a slice of my chocolate cake, she said, "My dear, this reminds me of my mother's recipe. You've got a gift. Never stop." Tears filled my eyes as I thanked her. Those words meant more than all of Margaret's insults combined. Within a year, Sophia's Delights had become a favorite in the neighborhood. I hired 2 assistants to help with baking and serving, and for the first time, I wasn't alone in the kitchen. Seeing my name on the signboard every morning reminded me how far I had come from the girl who once cried herself to sleep in her in-laws' house. But success brought its own challenges. Larger bakeries in the city began noticing me. One day, I received a letter from a well-known pastry chain offering to buy out my little shop for a small sum. Emma scoffed when she read it. "They think they can throw you crumbs and steal your recipes. Don't even think about it." I smiled. "I'm not selling. I'm growing." That was the first time I said it aloud. I'm growing. And I meant it, of course. Daniel hated the time I spent at the shop. "You care more about that bakery than you do about me," he complained one night. I set down my apron and looked him in the eyes. "Daniel, I begged you to believe me when your parents humiliated me. You didn't. This bakery is the only place where I feel strong, where I feel like myself again. If you can't support me, at least don't stand in my way." He shook his head. "You've changed, Sophia." "Yes," I replied firmly. "And I'm never going back to the woman who let your parents walk all over her." The turning point came when a popular food blogger discovered my shop. She posted glowing reviews and photos of my pastries, calling them hidden treasures. Overnight, customers lined up outside my door. I had to expand my hours, hire more staff, and rent a second location across town. Margaret couldn't ignore it anymore. One evening, she said bitterly, "I saw your shop mentioned in the paper. Don't get too proud, Sophia. Small businesses rise and fall every day." I smiled calmly. "Thank you for your concern, Margaret, but this is only the beginning." Her lips tightened, but I could see the unease in her eyes. For the first time, she realized I wasn't the weak girl she thought I was. Within 2 years, I had 4 bakeries across the city. Each one was thriving. My brand had become known for its authenticity, its warmth, and its unbeatable taste. I was no longer the bride who had been humiliated on her wedding day. I was Sophia, the entrepreneur, the businesswoman, the woman who had built something from nothing. But success didn't just give me pride, it gave me power. At a charity gala one evening, I was introduced to several investors. One of them, a sharp-eyed woman named Patricia, leaned in and said, "You're talented, Sophia, but talent alone won't make you a giant. Think bigger, think national." Her words stayed with me. That night, I lay awake imagining my bakeries in every major city, my name becoming a household brand. Why stop at 4 shops when I could build an empire? Meanwhile, Daniel grew more distant. He resented my success, especially as people began recognizing me in public. At dinner one night, he snapped, "Do you enjoy embarrassing me? Everyone keeps asking if I work for you. Do you realize how humiliating that is?" I put down my fork and looked at him steadily. "Daniel, I didn't ask to outgrow you, but I won't apologize for working hard. If my success embarrasses you, maybe you should ask yourself why." The silence that followed was heavier than any insult. Deep down, I knew our marriage was crumbling, but I no longer feared that. I wasn't the dependent girl he thought I would remain by the third year. Sophia's Delights had expanded into 8 locations, with plans for more. Investors offered millions for partnerships, and magazines featured my story as an example of resilience and determination. One afternoon, as I walked through my flagship store, employees and customers smiling all around me, I felt a wave of gratitude, not for my in-laws, not for Daniel, but for myself, for never giving up. Even when everyone doubted me, but little did they know, I hadn't forgotten that night at my wedding. The stolen money, the humiliation, the cruel laughter, every brick of my empire had been laid with the memory of that betrayal. And I knew, one day soon, I would have the chance to repay them, not with anger, but with power. The morning sun streamed through the glass walls of my new headquarters. Yes, headquarters. I could hardly believe it myself. What had started as one tiny bakery had now grown into a chain of 12 stores, each thriving, each carrying my name. Sophia's Delights. As I walked through the modern lobby, staff members greeted me with smiles. Some even whispered as I passed, "That's Sophia. She built this from nothing." Their admiration didn't inflate my ego, it fueled my determination. But not everyone was happy, especially not Margaret. It all began when the local business newspaper featured me on the front page. The headline read, "From Humiliation to Triumph." The woman behind Sophia's Delights, Margaret, nearly choked on her tea when she saw it. "How dare they call you a triumph?" she snapped during a family dinner, slamming the paper down on the table. "This is nothing but cheap publicity. Don't think you're some kind of queen just because you sell cakes." I met her glare calmly. "Margaret, those cakes now employ over 100 people, people who feed their families because of this business." Her face reddened. But Daniel stayed silent, shifting uncomfortably in his seat. For the first time, I saw fear in her eyes. Not fear of me as a person, but of what I represented: independence, success, and power that she could no longer control. Success had changed everything. Banks that once turned me away now offered loans eagerly. Investors who ignored me now lined up to pitch partnerships. I was invited to conferences, panels, and even television shows to share my story. But my favorite moment came when the city mayor himself visited one of my shops. Cameras flashed as he shook my hand and said, "Sophia, your story is an inspiration to women everywhere. We need more leaders like you." That video went viral within hours. Meanwhile, Daniel's pride withered. One evening, he burst into my office, slamming the door shut. "Do you have any idea how embarrassing this is for me? Everywhere I go, people ask about my wife, not me. I'm treated like a nobody." I leaned back in my chair. "Daniel, you had every chance to build something of your own. Instead, you chose to mock me when I started. Don't blame me for the choices you made." His face twisted in anger. "You're not the same woman I married." I held his gaze. "No, I'm stronger." For once, he had no response. The more successful I became, the more desperate Margaret grew to pull me down. She tried spreading rumors claiming I stole recipes, that my ingredients were low quality, that my business was on the verge of collapse. But each lie she spun only made my customers more loyal. They saw through her bitterness. My bakeries were always full, my shelves always empty by evening. Emma, ever the loyal friend, laughed when she heard one of Margaret's lies. "She's drowning Sophia, and she's grasping for anything to pull you down with her." I nodded. "Let her try. The higher I climb, the more powerless she becomes." By the 4th year, my chain had expanded beyond the city. We opened stores in 2 neighboring states, and every new launch was met with massive crowds. My name had become a brand, my story a symbol. But deep inside, I wasn't satisfied yet. It wasn't enough to succeed. I wanted the Margaret, Daniel, and everyone who doubted me to feel the weight of regret. And fate delivered the perfect opportunity. One evening, while reviewing contracts with Patricia, my investor, she casually mentioned, "Sophia, did you know Margaret's family business is in trouble?" I froze. "What do you mean?" Patricia smirked. "Their company's debt has been piling up. Mismanagement, overspending, arrogancy, name it. If someone stepped in with the right offer, they could take control." My heart raced. The very people who once mocked me, who stole my dowry and humiliated me, were now sinking. And I, the woman they underestimated, held the power to decide their fate. I visited Margaret's company headquarters the next week, disguised under the formality of a business meeting. The building was old, crumbling, and nearly empty. Gone was the proud empire she once bragged about. Margaret met me in the boardroom, her face stiff. "To what do I owe the pleasure?" she asked coldly. I placed a folder on the table. "I'm here with an offer. I'll buy your company. I'll clear your debts. In return, your business, your legacy will belong to me." Her face turned pale. You can't be serious." I leaned in, my voice steady. "I'm very serious. You mocked me when I had nothing. Now, I have everything you need. Think carefully, Margaret. This is your only chance." For the first time, she looked defeated. That night, I returned home and stood before the mirror. I barely recognized the woman staring back. Strong, confident, unshakable. The pain of my wedding night still lingered in my heart, but it had transformed into fuel that built an empire. I whispered to myself, "This is only the beginning." The boardroom was silent. All eyes were on me as the contracts were laid out on the glossy oak table. Margaret sat across from me, her hands trembling slightly, though she tried to mask it with a stern expression. Daniel was beside her, pale and tight-lipped. The irony was almost poetic. Years ago, I sat at their dining table as a bride, humiliated, stripped of my dignity and my dowry. Today, they sat before me, desperate, powerless, about to sign away everything they once used to crush me. "Are we clear on the terms?" my lawyer asked, breaking the silence. Margaret's voice cracked. "You're really going to do this to your own family?" I met her gaze, my tone cold but steady. "Family doesn't betray you, Margaret. Family doesn't steal from you on your wedding day and laugh while you cry. You taught me what not to call family. This is business now." Daniel shifted uncomfortably. "Sophia, please. We can work something out. You don't need to take everything." My lips curled into a bitter smile. "Funny, that's exactly what I told you when you stole from me. You didn't listen then. Why should I listen now?" The papers were signed. With each stroke of their pens, I felt the final chain of my past breaking. The news spread like wildfire. Sophia Hayes acquires Greenwood Enterprises. It wasn't just a business deal. It was a headline that symbolized the collapse of an empire that once mocked me and the rise of the woman they underestimated. For days, journalists camped outside my offices. Social media exploded with the story. From bride to boss, they called me the woman who turned betrayal into power. And for the first time, I didn't shy away from the spotlight. I embraced it. The next week I visited what was once Margaret's office. Now, it bore a shiny new plaque. Sophia Hayes, CEO. She sat in the corner, reduced to a consultant role under me. It was part of the deal she could stay, but she would answer to me. "How does it feel?" I asked softly, standing by the window. Her lips pressed into a thin line. "You've taken everything." I turned to her, my voice calm. "No, Margaret. You gave it away the moment you betrayed me. I just collected what was left." Daniel wasn't spared either. Our marriage had become nothing but a fragile thread, fraying under the weight of resentment. He begged me to forgive, to go back to how things were. One evening, he cornered me in our home. "Sophia, I made mistakes. But we can fix this. You've proved your point. Let's rebuild us." I looked at him. Really looked at him. Really looked at him, the man who once let his mother destroy me, who mocked my dreams, who cared more about appearances than love. "No, Daniel," I said firmly. "I rebuilt myself without you. And I don't need you dragging me down again." The divorce papers were served the next morning. Emma stood by me through it all, beaming with pride. "Sophia, do you realize what you've done? You didn't just win, you rewrote the entire story." I smiled, tears stinging my eyes. "I didn't do it for revenge, Emma. I did it to prove to myself that they couldn't break me. But seeing their regret, that's just the bonus." Months later, I held a grand opening gala for the newly rebranded Greenwood Enterprises, now folded under the Sophia's Delights corporate family. The ballroom sparkled with lights, music, and laughter. Investors, partners, employees, all celebrating the future. I stood on stage, looking out at the sea of faces. Cameras flashed. My heart swelled. When I started this journey, I said into the microphone, I was told I was nothing, that I would never succeed, that I wasn't worth respect. Tonight, I stand before you not just as a businesswoman, but as living proof that resilience is stronger than betrayal. The crowd erupted in applause as the night drew to a close. I stepped outside onto the balcony. The city lights glittered below me, vibrant and alive. For a moment, I remembered that broken bride crying in her wedding gown, watching her dreams shatter. I whispered to her across time, "You made it. You survived. And you rose higher than they ever imagined." And deep inside, I knew this wasn't the end. It was the beginning of a legacy.